crime doesn't pay. Well, neither does hard work. And this isn't my attempt to say crime does pay, but it is my attempt for us to have a discussion today around the realities of hard work. And the reason I think it's so powerful for us to have this conversation is because you, like me, might have grown up hearing again and again and again, crime doesn't pay, crime doesn't pay, crime doesn't pay. That was pasted through means of media, growing up, movies, films, news, articles. It always seemed like the message that was attempted to get across was that crime doesn't pay. But what's interesting is, depending on where you grew up, it might have looked to you very much so like crime does pay. Because if you grew up in an area like I grew up, you saw people with the proceeds of crime, and they didn't look like it didn't pay. They actually looked like they were getting more paid than everyone else in the game. So this is interesting because if the media put so much energy into the messaging of crime doesn't pay, but yet as you mature, you quickly realize that the hardest work doesn't pay, then the question is, what actually does pay? So this is why I decided for us to talk about this today. Now, on your journey to creating cash flow, whether that be the first stages where it's creating cash flow consistently, or a latter stage in terms of creating cash flow colossally, one of the important things to understand is what work actually works. And for most people, they just assume that whatever they do is going to pay off for them. And one of the things I often share with people is, please understand as early as possible that the hardest workers are not the highest paid workers. Okay, the people that work the hardest don't get paid the most. And this is something we all know. Okay, and even if we don't know it, like in terms of notionally in our knowledge, we know it instinctively. Okay, so let me give you a quick example. After studying my first undergraduate degree, I went on to study the first master's that I studied, my first MSc, and that was an MSc in statistics at the University College London, UCL, in central London. And as I studied this degree, the thought process inside of me was, I will complete this degree and then I'll go on to do my PhD. And then after doing my PhD, I'll go and work in finance. Now, specifically in finance, I wanted to work as what they call a quant. Quant is short for a quantitative analyst. Now, the reason I wanted to be a quant is because traders were the famous people when I was growing up. However, traders often, from what I heard, had a 10-year lifespan on their employment, usually a lot less, right? Now, being someone who looked a certain way, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't putting myself in a suicidal employment route. So as a result, I decided not to work towards being a trader, but rather to work towards being a quant. So what quantitative analysts do, what quants do, is they basically are the highly intelligent individuals who create the algorithms, who create the formulas, who create the frameworks, who create the systems effectively that traders use. So what happens is, although a quantitative analyst may not get paid as much as a trader may get $1 million in a year based on bonuses, etc., and their package, right? A quantitative analyst would probably get starting salary 180,000, mid-range salary 300,000, and then going up, right? But their job was safer, even though it wasn't paid as much. And my plan was, okay, go and become a quantitative analyst. And this was my whole game plan. My whole game plan was finish my master's in statistics, go and do my PhD in statistics, complete my PhD in statistics, go into finance, work for 7 years, okay, save all or the large majority of my money, and then leave finance and become a teacher. And if I hadn't failed my exams the first year round in my degree, in my master's for statistics, that probably would have been what would have happened. And I'm thankful to God, because I know now that wasn't his plan for me, okay? For several reasons, but I'll share with you the main reason, because this illustrates hard work. So as I worked extremely diligently to succeed during my master's in statistics, one of the things that happened after I failed my exams is I went into prayer, because I'm a person who prays, I'm a person who reads the Bible. And from the age of 18, specifically just before my 19th birthday, I committed to living my life for Christ, for God, right? So it was a real shock to me, a real surprise to me when I failed my master's. It was a surprise to me when I failed anything. And this was probably like the only thing or the big thing that I failed that really alerted me to this idea. And it was like, how could I fail? Like, I got God on my side. How could I fail? And if you're someone who's a believer, or you're someone who's failed at something in your past and you're asking yourself the same question, I want to encourage you and let you know that there's usually a bigger plan than the plan that you have in your mind. And at the time, I didn't realize that. At the time, I didn't know that. But that was my mindset. My mindset was, no, I can't fail. I've got God with me. And I perceived me failing my exams the first time round for my master's in statistics as me failing, when really what it was is me recalibrating. Okay, so one of the internal conversations I had when I failed my exams is, how could this happen? Like, I got God with me. Like, I have to succeed. I have to pass. Right? I should have got the best results, etc. And then the thought dawned on me: why did I need to succeed? And then I thought about what I wanted to do this for. I thought about whether the Lord had even led me onto the Masters in Statistics, let alone led me to want to succeed so I could do my PhD. And mind you, my PhD that I applied for was the very first degree at all that I applied for and received a unconditional offer to actually do. So if I didn't grow up in East London, if I wasn't coming from a financially challenged background, I could have, right? The likelihood was unlikely that I would have, but I could have gone and done my PhD even though I failed my master's, because I received an unconditional offer. Okay, now whether internally my supervisors, my lecturers, the doctors that would have supervised me would have had confidence about my abilities, having failed my master's in statistics, is a whole nother question. So I would have had to spend a long time helping them build up that belief. But just on the strength of my character, on the strength of my coursework, on the strength of everything up to the point before I actually failed those exams, my lecturers were highly convinced that I was a model PhD candidate, and as a result, I received an unconditional offer to do my PhD at the UCL Institute of Statistics. Now, the reason I share this story is because failing those exams caused me to have this internal dialogue, and in the internal dialogue, in this internal conversation, what basically came out of it was, why do I want to succeed? And I realized why I wanted to succeed was so I could generate income as a quant for 7 years and then fail and then leave, retire, whatever the word is, and become a teacher. And as that thought dawned on me, I realized something. I realized something that I'd never thought of before. And again, this is not saying this is anyone else's situation. I'm talking about my situation. I realized that I was being, this is the word that came to me, so please, I hope it doesn't offend anyone, but I realized I was being a prostitute. Okay, I was selling myself, proverbially at that time, to what would be the highest bidder. Because what I realized is the only reason I wanted to become a quant was not because of an interest, not because of an expression, not because it would give me the opportunity to flex my educational, institutional, or qualificational muscles, but actually just because it would give me the highest pay in the safest way, so I could save up and become something completely different another day. Now, for those of you who don't know my story, basically, having failed the Masters in Statistics the first time round, I then took the exams again the next year. I then, because of this internal dialogue I'm talking to you about, went into a career. Well, it wasn't a career at the time, but I ended up working in a voluntary school for 3 years teaching maths. So I literally became a voluntary teacher for 3 years. And it was whilst doing that voluntary teaching role in the first year that one of the maths teachers, who was a maths teacher before me in that school, who was also a qualified math teacher, advised me that he thinks I'd make a great teacher. And it was interesting because that's a story for another day. If you guys are interested in that story, let me know in the comments below. But nonetheless, we went through this process, and effectively what happened for me was I realized that I would be engaging in what I would call prostitution to continue the pursuit of becoming a quant for myself, because of the purposes that I desired for myself, right? Now, why did I share with you this story? I shared with you this story because hard work doesn't always pay the way you expect it to pay. You see, the hard work I put into studying that master's helped me realize I'm not supposed to be on the trajectory that I was actually on, even though that was the trajectory that I was on. The second factor that we internally know inside, that hard work is not always the best work, right? And we can put in hard work at work that doesn't work, right? Is the fact that on those trading floors, let's take a building, let's take One Canada Square, okay? One Canada Square is the big building inside of Canary Wharf. Canary Wharf is the area. Most people call the building Canary Wharf, but the building is not called Canary Wharf. The building is called One Canada Square, and the area is called Canary Wharf, right? So in this One Canada Square building in Canary Wharf, there are some floors which have traders on, right? There's some floors that have these quantitative analysts on, right? So there's floors that are owned completely by bankers. Now, what's interesting is, I remember when I was training to become a quantitative analyst, one of the things I learned is that, traders can get to work as early as 6 a.m. right? Some maybe even earlier. Quantitative analysts, again, similar times, right? Depending on your diligence and your investment in your role, right? And as I was learning this stuff, I was thinking to myself, well, this is kind of interesting. Like, people really put in some sweat equity to become this thing. And I was thinking they work so hard until I started actually doing property investment. And when I started doing property investment, like to the degree that I started doing it, not at the beginning when I worked as an estate agent, but when I started actually doing it for myself, I started spending a lot more time in the Canary Wharf area for several reasons. One, because I actually hosted a networking event there. I hosted one of the most successful property investment networking meetings in the whole of the UK, right? And this was in Canary Wharf. We'd have over 100 people coming every single month. And the more time I spent in the area of Canary Wharf, the more I'd see certain interesting things. And one of the things that I saw, which was super interesting, which helped me understand this conceptual idea in a deep way about hard work, is I'd see cleaners show up before traders. Okay? I'd see cleaners that are showing up to clean these big buildings like One Canada Square at maybe 4 a.m., maybe 3 a.m., maybe 2 a.m., maybe doing night shifts, maybe getting in at 10 p.m. and staying until 3 a.m. And this doesn't just happen in One Canada Square. This happens across the globe. This happens across the UK. It happens around your way, wherever you're based. There are buildings being cleaned by people who are the true hardest workers in that building, but they're never even seen by the majority of people who are perceived as the hardest workers in that building. Now, why do I bring it up? The reason I bring it up is because of this. I bring it up because if we don't get to grips with the fact that hard work doesn't work the way you think it works, what will happen is you will subject yourself, like I did through my master's in statistics, to extreme and extraneous hard work, only to realize one day that crime doesn't pay. Well, I mean, hard work doesn't pay. And when you realize that hard work doesn't pay the way you think it's supposed to pay, sometimes for some of us, it creates a great awakening. Unfortunately, for many people, it actually creates a great shaking. The kind of shaking where people decide that their life is not worthy of living. And I don't want that to be anybody's story, which is part of the reason why I decided to do this video today, just to make it super clear and super simple for us to all understand that hard work doesn't necessarily pay the way you think it pays. So, as I shared earlier, the key question then becomes, well, Samuel, if hard work doesn't pay the way I think it pays, then what should be the work at which I focus on today? And the answer to that is quite simple. You should focus on work that is aligned with your purpose, because most people don't realize that your purpose is everything. In the Bible, in the book of Jeremiah, God says to Jeremiah, before you were born, before you were formed, before you were even fully knitted together, woven together in the womb of your mother, I already knew you. And I have already ordained you as a prophet to the nations. Now, the reason this is so empowering is because this helps us understand that before you were formed, before I was formed, before you were born, before I was born, there was already a designation on your life to a nation. You've already been classified. You've already been categorized. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to become what you were created to become. You can become anything you want to become. You can become someone who derails the path of your destiny if you decide to. Okay? Because there's people that do that every single day. And ultimately, that's how the enemy gets paid. But the reality is, if you are someone who wants to go hard so that you don't have to go home, if you are someone who wants to invest your energy, skills, talent, and time in something that ultimately reveals your talent to the world, then my little 2 pence for you today is focus on the thing that really pays. And the thing that ultimately pays more than any other thing, definitely more importantly than hard work, and this work does work, it's working on your purpose. So with that being said, there's no need to drag it out today, no need to make it longer than it is. I want to encourage you to get full of purpose so you can live out your purpose and make sure that you start to live on purpose. With that being said, Sammy I Can Win is signing out. I look forward to seeing you on another video in the future. If you got value or you had a key takeaway, feel free to let us know in the comments below. Good day, God bless, and always remember that small keys open up big doors. Let's go.